So I recently did a video on employment rights. Great video. If you want to see it, I'll put the link in above shortly. But the video itself, although it got a lot of views, it also got a hell of a lot of comments. And the comments themselves were really interesting. They seemed to indicate that a lot of people that were viewing it were checking out their employment rights because they thought their manager might be playing them. And in many instances, it appeared their manager was playing them. Now, I don't like it when managers play staff. Certainly not if they're a good staff member that wants to work hard, that tries their best, and it's just being manipulated. So in this video, what I want to do is answer the question of whether you're being played by your manager. Hello Matthew, how you doing?
Hiya mate, how you doing?
Okay. Okay. Now if you haven't seen our videos before, we do videos aimed to help employees, and that's employees either in employment or seeking employment. The purpose of our channel is to be very honest, very real, and tell you as it is. If you like the sound of this channel, do consider subscribing to our channel, and if you do, click the bell icon so you're not going to miss any one of our videos. So, how do you know when your boss is trying to play you? So what I think is probably the best way of trying to answer this question is to give a few scenarios that I would go by that sum up the things you're likely to come across. These are the things that you want to look out for, and to be able to have the knowledge of what to look out for is beneficial so you don't get played in future. The first example is going to be something I like to call the carrot dangle. Now the carrot dangle is basically where a manager or boss will say to you, if you go and do a particular task, it might be a certain sale, or they want you to go and do a project or a load of work, to be able to offer you some sense of motivation to want to go and do it and do a really good job of it, they promise you a reward. That might be extra overtime, a bit of bonus, maybe a couple of extra hours in your pay packet. But if they are doing that only then to know that they can't actually reward you with that, and then later in the day you all of a sudden realise that they can't offer that, they make some excuse for it. Oh, I thought I could offer it to you, but I spoke to my boss and they said, yeah, I can't really do that, I'm really sorry about it, but great job by the way. You're going to be played by them. That's something you want to keep an eye out for. There are many managers out there that will try the carrot dangle tactic. The second example that I want to give is something called fear motivation. There's two ways of motivating someone to go and do a task that they otherwise wouldn't want to do. It's either with a reward if they did a good job, as in the carrot dangle example, or a punishment if they don't do the job. There are bosses out there that will say to people, if you don't go and do this job, I will fire you, or I'll put you on a disciplinary, or I'm going to cut your hours or give you a pay cut. Make sure you do it, otherwise I'm going to punish you. Now that for me is the lowest of the low way of motivating someone. Some people who become managers seem to think they are a dictator. I've worked for people myself who would be quite happy to openly declare that their operation isn't a democracy, it is a dictatorship. You want to make sure that you know whether those threats can actually be carried out. And most of the time, they can't. They can't start threatening you in your job under you not doing certain circumstances. You will have certain rights. And if you want to understand what your rights are, we did a previous video, which this one really is a follow-up for. So you want to watch that one, and that video itself, I'm going to put the link up there. It's basically Employment Rights UK, and it'll explain all your key rights that every employee in the UK really needs to know. So great watch. Go and watch that video. The next example I want to give is something called passing the buck. Your boss's boss will tell them to go and do a task, and it'll be a task that they don't want to do. So they will do what's called delegation. They'll delegate it to your boss, and guess what? If they don't want to do it, then they'll pass it to you. You see, you understand that a manager is going to want to ask you to do certain jobs. Why are you a staff member otherwise? You paid to do a certain job, and your manager's job really is to make sure that all the jobs that need doing get done. A manager's job really, most of it is going to be delegation. That's what they're paid to do, and that's perfectly fine in itself. Where it goes wrong is where the job that they're asking you to do is one of those where it can land you in hot water if you don't do the job properly. If their boss knows that doing this particular job, if they take accountability for it and they don't do it right, it could cost them serious consequence. It might even cost them their job. So they pass it down and delegate it down, and they make sure that it's been clear to anyone around them, their bosses, their superiors, that it's been delegated and so is accountable for doing that task. So if it goes wrong, the buck is passed to them. It's their responsibility. If your boss is then delegated that task, they think, Yeah, I don't fancy losing my job, or I don't fancy landing myself in hot water or messing up my own career. What I'll do is I'll delegate it down to one of my staff members. I'll make sure that if anything goes wrong, it's they who carry the price. If it goes wrong, they have to deal with that burden. They are accountable for it. If it is not in your normal job remit, protect yourself. Most of these jobs are meant to be done by people that are going to be properly trained for it. If it's a basic job, if it's going to do a load of manual work, then you're working in a warehouse and going to ask you to put a load of stock away, and unfortunately, yeah, it probably is under your remit. But if it's certainly a job which isn't under your normal area of responsibility, it's something unusual, it's something you don't really know how to do, or you're not trained for it, then keep an eye out, because what you don't want to do is take accountability for something and take the rap if something goes wrong that you're not properly trained or skilled to be able to do, just because your boss doesn't want to risk their own career and their own neck for it. The fourth example is what I like to call a counteroffer with false promises. So to explain, this is where you have gone for another job and you've intended to leave your employer, okay? You've gone for another job, you've accepted another job, and then you go to hand in your notice to your boss. And your boss comes back and says to you, hang on a minute, why are you leaving? And you give them the reasons and they say, look, actually, we'll sort those things out. I didn't tell you, but we can offer you that pay rise. It's going to be coming up in a pay review in a couple of months. Or that overtime that you've been lacking, look, I didn't tell you, we signed up a new deal. It comes in the next 6 weeks. You're going to get an increase on overtime. That training, yeah, we're actually bringing that in. I haven't told you, it's coming down from head office. That's going to be coming into play. And they'll make every promise in the book to keep you on board. Because if you're a manager and you have a staff member that leaves you, all of a sudden, it leaves you in the lurch. However, if you're a manager and you know that that staff member is going to be leaving, but you can keep them on a little bit longer, but you know they've already got their eye out, you can then look to replace them in your time on your terms. And meanwhile, you manage that person out of the business. On the flip side of it, if you're that person who then goes and takes a surprise counteroffer, i.e. you was intending to leave, but they've made a bunch of promises and convinced you to stay, what happens almost every time that happens from my experience is that same candidate calls up 3 months later and says, Seb, my boss, they haven't held their word. Actually, this hasn't happened. They made me these promises. All of it was a lot of fabrication. By the way, is that job that I went for, would they still look at me? Is it still available? And I'll answer, no, it isn't, because jobs don't stay along very long in our market. Most markets, to be fair, they won't stay long unless you are God's gift, unless you have a set of skills that can warrant £100,000 salaries. The chances are people won't open up jobs for you. Most people, 95% of people out there, probably more than that, you're not just going to be able to use your skills and go, right, Mr. Recruiter, can you go and get me a job? It won't work that way. You don't have the skills that are going to be in demand enough. There'll be someone else that can do what you want to do that will come along the following week. And that's the reality of it. So taking a counteroffer, a surprise counteroffer, is not a good idea. And plus, why is it that they're only promising you these things when you're set to leave? How comes they didn't come to you beforehand and tell you we're going to offer more overtime, we're going to do a pay review? Why wouldn't they tell you those things? How comes it's only when their hand is forced that they're willing to hand something back to you? That would say to me that's a bad employer and your decision to leave is probably a good idea. And that's not me saying that from a recruiter's perspective. That's me saying that from a general perspective. Final example I want to give, 5, is going to be something called taking the credit. Now, taking the credit is where your boss asks you to go and do a job that you do a really good job at. Let's say they know you've got a talent or an ability or a bunch of ideas to go and do a really good job of it. So they go to you, look, you're my star guy, you're my star girl. I need you to go and do this job, and because I know you're the best at it. But keep it quiet. I don't want other people to get jealous because I'm giving you a bit of extra responsibility here. Keep an eye out if ever they tell you to keep quiet about it. Because what will then happen is you go and do a fantastic job, you might have done a bunch of work, and all of a sudden, what you'll then find is their boss won't be aware that you've done any of this, but they will be aware that your boss has been responsible for it. Your boss will get all of the credit for all of the work that you've done, not them. Especially the time that they start going, keep quiet about it, don't tell anyone I've given you that task, because that's the one where then you can't then go, well, I did it, everybody else knows I did it, because you kept it quiet. They'll get the credit, you won't, it will benefit their career, it won't make a blind bit of difference to your career, and you've done a bunch of work that someone else has got the credit for. The lesson I would want someone to take away from this video is that you don't want to get played. However, there is another lesson that I would want you to take from this video, and that's something I call the one-time rule. You see, there are many managers out there that are unscrupulous, but there are many managers that are actually very good. And I've had it before where I've managed someone that's been managed by various unscrupulous managers before, and I would like to consider myself as a good manager who means well. And there are many other managers like myself that would want to look after people, that would want to take them under their wing and do a good job for someone who will do a good job for you. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. But what you don't want to do is then find yourself as a manager inheriting a staff member who's been treated badly before, and then they've made the decision that they don't trust management. They don't trust bosses. They get a boss, doesn't matter how nice they are to them, their guard is constantly up. And that's probably because they've been treated badly by a manager in the first place. So I like to go by something I call the one-time rule. And the one-time rule is when a manager that I have not worked for before asks me to go and do a task, I will make sure I do it to a T. I will do it to the best of my ability. I'll try my utmost to make sure it is as good as possible, and then the task is done and handed over to them. Because this, for me, tells me everything I need to know about that manager, and that is whether they're a good manager that I can trust, that will look after me, that therefore they'll scratch my back, make my job a lot easier, or they're a bad manager, in which case I've got to make sure I put my guard up and I know I don't want to get played by them. So you know, if you go and do that task and then the manager, if they're a bad manager, comes back to you and then learns that they can just give you every naff task out there to go and do, and then they try and manipulate you more by taking the mickey, you know that then you don't trust them. They've stitched you up once, they've played you once, they're not going to play you twice, and you know where you stand. But on the flip side of it, if that manager comes back sincerely and goes, actually, very good job, and you know all of a sudden that this manager is going to start taking you under their wing, there's a few things that they do that gives a little bit of favoritism, not so much it's going to upset the troops, but you can see that they're going to now look out for you. If you need a favour, you need a day off at short notice, yeah, no problem, I'll sort that out for you. Then you've got a good manager. What you don't want to do is then be that person that goes, all managers are bad, I don't want to take any notice, because you're never going to get any favours back. If you treat someone badly, even if they're a good manager, they're not going to look after you. To be able to know whether you're being played or not and be able to make your career better or easier in the job that you're doing, you have to give something back. Put yourself out there, put your head above the parapet, expose yourself or whatever to be able to learn about your boss. It's always a good idea to do so because you'll then make yourself friends in higher places. So with that, that pretty much sums this video up. I hope I've answered the question for you. If you have any questions, you have any examples, you want to find out more stuff, you have any ideas for other videos, do put them in the comments below. If you like this video, do click the like button, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, click the bell icon so you're not going to miss any one of our forthcoming videos, and we'll see you next time for the next video.